Hidden secrets of the Sagittarius sign in 2026.
Most people believe they understand Sagittarius. They see the laughter, the confidence, the fearless honesty, the restless hunger for experience. They see the archer moving forward, always aiming somewhere beyond the horizon. But here's the truth.
What you see is only the surface.
Because in 2026, the Sagittarius spirit is entering a deeper phase, one that most people will completely misunderstand. And if you are a Sagittarius, or if you love one, what I'm about to reveal may completely change how you see them. There are hidden mechanisms behind their independence. There are unspoken rules behind their loyalty. There is a philosophy behind their bluntness. And there is a reason why some people feel inspired by them, while others feel threatened.
Sagittarius is not random. Sagittarius is not reckless. Sagittarius is not emotionally detached. Sagittarius is strategic, but in a way that is rarely obvious.
In 2026, that strategy becomes sharper. Their intuition becomes more precise. Their boundaries become clearer, and the hidden parts of their personality become impossible to ignore. But here's what most people get wrong. They think Sagittarius avoids depth, when in reality, Sagittarius is searching for something so profound that shallow connections simply cannot survive in their presence. They think Sagittarius runs from commitment, when in reality, Sagittarius refuses to commit to anything that limits their growth.
They think Sagittarius is impulsive,
when in reality, Sagittarius feels time differently, as if life is too short to waste on what does not expand the soul.
And in 2026, that inner truth will define everything.
This is not a list of cliches. This is not recycled horoscope language. These are the 8 hidden psychological codes that shape the Sagittarius mind, especially now.
Some of these secrets protect them. Some of these secrets isolate them. Some of these secrets make them magnetic. And some of these secrets make them dangerous to underestimate.
Because when you truly understand Sagittarius, you realize something powerful. Their freedom is not rebellion, it is survival.
Their honesty is not cruelty, it is alignment.
Their restlessness is not instability, it is vision.
And the first hidden secret will reveal why Sagittarius, despite their fearless exterior, guards their heart more carefully than anyone realizes. If you've ever wondered why a Sagittarius can appear open, yet emotionally unreachable,
if you've ever felt their warmth, but sensed a protective wall behind it,
then stay with me.
Because secret number 8 explains everything.
Let's begin. Secret number 1.
They avoid drama, but not for the reason you think. People often say that Sagittarius avoids drama. They imagine someone who simply walks away from conflict, someone who shrugs, laughs, and moves on. But that interpretation is shallow.
Sagittarius does not avoid drama because they are indifferent.
They avoid drama because drama is small.
And Sagittarius was never built for small living.
The archer aims at distant horizons, not at petty battles, not at emotional traps, not at repetitive arguments that lead nowhere. When Sagittarius senses that a situation is shrinking their vision instead of expanding it, something inside them disengages. This is not weakness.
It is instinct. In 2026, this instinct becomes sharper than ever. Sagittarius begins to recognize faster which environments nourish growth and which ones quietly drain it. And instead of arguing, explaining, or trying to fix what cannot be fixed, they do something far more powerful. They withdraw their energy. This is where most people misunderstand them. Because Sagittarius does not always fight. Sometimes they simply exit. And that silent exit is far more final than any dramatic confrontation.
Why? Because Sagittarius sees time differently. They understand consciously or not that energy is finite, and wasting it on unnecessary emotional turbulence feels like betrayal of their own potential. There is something philosophical about the way Sagittarius handles conflict. They ask themselves often internally, will this matter in a year? Will this expand my life? Will this teach me something meaningful?
If the answer is no, they detach. It is not coldness, it is perspective.
But here is the shadow side.
When Sagittarius avoids drama too quickly, they can also avoid necessary confrontation. They may choose freedom over depth, distance over resolution, movement over repair, and in doing so, they sometimes leave behind conversations that could have strengthened bonds. This is the paradox. Sagittarius values peace, but real peace, not forced harmony. And if a relationship or situation constantly pulls them into chaos, they eventually decide that walking away is wiser than winning.
You may have seen this in real life. A Sagittarius friend who tolerated behavior for months, even years, without visible reaction. They joked, they brushed it off, they seemed unbothered, until one day, they were gone.
No explosion.
No public drama, just absence, because Sagittarius has a threshold.
And in 2026, that threshold lowers.
They are less willing to entertain repetitive negativity, less willing to justify their boundaries, less willing to explain their need for space, not because they don't care, but because they finally understand something powerful. Peace is chosen.
And if it cannot be chosen within a space, it must be created outside of it.
The archer's strength is forward motion.
Stagnant emotional cycles feel suffocating. Arguments that go nowhere feel like anchors tied to their feet. So instead of staying in the storm, they aim beyond it.
But here is the deeper layer, the part most people never consider.
Sagittarius avoids drama because drama distracts from purpose.
Their soul is wired toward meaning, toward discovery, toward expansion of truth, and conflict that revolves around ego-controlled jealousy or insecurity feels spiritually misaligned.
In 2026, this becomes crystal clear. Sagittarius begins to prioritize alignment over attachment.
If something consistently pulls them out of alignment, they do not argue to save it. They release it. That can look ruthless to people who rely on emotional intensity to measure love, but to Sagittarius, love is not measured by how loudly you fight.
It is measured by how freely you grow together.
Life lessons.
Here is the deeper lesson hidden inside this secret.
Not every battle deserves your presence.
Some conflicts are invitations to shrink.
Some arguments are distractions disguised as importance.
Some people only feel powerful when you react.
Maturity is not learning how to win every argument. Maturity is learning which arguments are beneath your future.
Sagittarius teaches us that peace is not passivity.
Peace is strategic focus. There is strength in refusing to engage with what does not elevate you. There is wisdom in recognizing when emotional chaos is simply noise. But there is also a responsibility here.
Walking away is powerful, but only when it comes from clarity, not avoidance. Freedom should not become escape. Violence should not replace necessary truth.
The true evolution of Sagittarius in 2026 is this. They are learning when to disengage and when to stand firmly and speak, because sometimes the bravest thing is leaving, and sometimes the bravest thing is staying long enough to transform the situation. Discernment is the real power, and that is the lesson. Comment if this resonates with you, because the next secret will reveal something even more surprising, something that explains why Sagittarius, despite avoiding drama, will fiercely defend the people they choose to stand beside.
And that contradiction may be the most powerful part of them. Let's continue. Secret number 2.
Unwavering loyalty, but only to what aligns with their truth.
One of the most misunderstood qualities of Sagittarius is loyalty.
People assume that because Sagittarius values freedom, they must struggle with commitment,
but that assumption reveals a shallow understanding of what loyalty truly means to them. Sagittarius does not offer loyalty out of obligation. They offer it out of alignment, and that distinction changes everything.
The archer does not aim randomly. They choose their direction carefully.
And once they choose it, they commit fully.
In 2026, this trait becomes even more defined.
Sagittarius becomes more selective about who enters their inner circle. They observe more, they evaluate more, they feel more before they attach. But once someone crosses that invisible threshold, once they are recognized as aligned, Sagittarius becomes fiercely protective.
This is not emotional dependency. This is philosophical loyalty.
If you are loved by a Sagittarius, you will feel it in actions, not speeches. They will show up when others disappear. They will defend you when others stay silent. They will support you without broadcasting it. Because loyalty to Sagittarius is sacred. It is not transactional. It is not temporary. It is a reflection of their internal code.
But here is where the shadow enters.
Sagittarius does not stay loyal to people.
They stay loyal to truth.
If someone betrays their values, if someone manipulates their trust, if someone repeatedly acts out of alignment,
Sagittarius does not argue endlessly.
they reassess, and once that inner decision is made, the shift is permanent.
This is why some people feel shocked when a Sagittarius finally leaves. They mistake patience for permanence.
But Sagittarius was observing the entire time. In 2026, this becomes even more visible. Sagittarius begins to remove themselves from connections that no longer reflect growth, honesty, or expansion.
Not out of anger, out of integrity, because for Sagittarius, loyalty without truth becomes self-betrayal.
And they will not betray themselves.
There is something deeply spiritual about the way Sagittarius commits.
They do not cling.
They stand beside. They do not control. They trust. They do not demand constant reassurance. They expect consistency.
If you promise something to a Sagittarius and honor it, their respect deepens.
If you break your word repeatedly, their distance grows silently. The Archer is ruled by expansion, by Jupiter's influence of wisdom, philosophy, higher meaning.
So their loyalty is not rooted in fear of loss.
It is rooted in shared direction.
They ask one unspoken question.
Are we growing forward together?
If the answer is yes, they will fight for you.
If the answer becomes no, they will quietly step away.
And this is where people misunderstand them.
They say Sagittarius is inconsistent, but what they fail to see is that Sagittarius is consistent with their standards, not with comfort.
In 2026, this clarity sharpens. Sagittarius becomes less tolerant of half-truths, less patient with emotional immaturity, less willing to compromise their principles for temporary connection.
Their loyalty becomes rarer, but stronger. You may recognize this pattern.
A Sagittarius who stood by someone for years through chaos mistakes growth cycles.
But the moment integrity was violated repeatedly, they did not scream. They did not beg.
They simply adjusted their aim. And once the Archer redirects, there is no returning to the same target. Life lessons. Here is the deeper truth hidden in this secret.
Loyalty is not attachment.
Loyalty is alignment.
You do not owe permanence to people who abandon integrity. You do not owe endless chances to those who repeatedly cross boundaries. True loyalty begins with loyalty to yourself.
Sagittarius teaches us that commitment without shared growth becomes stagnation. And stagnation is the opposite of expansion.
But there is also responsibility here. Before walking away, ask yourself,
have you communicated clearly? Have you allowed space for growth? Have you distinguished between human mistakes and broken character? Discernment is everything. In 2026, Sagittarius is not becoming colder.
They are becoming clearer. They are learning that defending others is noble, but defending their own truth is essential. Comment if this resonates with you, because the next secret will reveal something even more revealing, something that explains why Sagittarius often challenges limits, authority, and expectations, even when it costs them comfort.
And once you understand that, you will understand the real fire behind the Archer. Let's continue.
Secret number 3. They challenge limits, not to rebel, but to expand.
There is a reason Sagittarius has a reputation for going against the grain.
People often call them contrarian, stubborn, difficult, too opinionated. But what most fail to see is this:
Sagittarius does not challenge limits to cause chaos.
They challenge limits because something inside them refuses confinement.
The Archer does not aim downward.
They aim beyond what is visible. And in 2026, this instinct becomes impossible to ignore.
Sagittarius begins to feel allergic to artificial ceilings in relationships, careers, environments, and even belief system. If something feels limiting without purpose, they question it.
Not aggressively, but instinctively.
Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, the force of expansion, wisdom, higher perspective. So when someone tells them this is the only way, their mind immediately searches for another route.
Not because they disrespect structure, but because they believe growth should never stop. You may have seen this in real life. A Sagittarius employee who challenges outdated systems, a Sagittarius partner who questions unhealthy dynamics, a Sagittarius friend who refuses to accept narrow thinking. They are not trying to provoke, they are trying to expand the field, and that difference is crucial. In 2026, Sagittarius becomes even more aware of where they have been playing small to maintain peace. They start asking themselves deeper questions. Am I living up to my potential? Am I accepting limits that were never truly mine? Am I compromising growth for comfort? This inner questioning creates movement,
Sometimes sudden movement.
because Sagittarius does not slowly negotiate with stagnation.
They outgrow it.
But here is the shadow side. When Sagittarius challenges everything without discernment, they can burn bridges unnecessarily. They may mistake structure for restriction. They may resist guidance simply because it feels imposed.
And that resistance can create isolation.
The lesson in 2026 is not rebellion, it is intelligent expansion.
Sagittarius is learning that not every rule is a prison. Some rules are frameworks for mastery.
And not every authority is control. Some authority is earned wisdom. The real power lies in knowing which limits are illusions and which are stepping stones. The archer must know when to pull back before releasing the arrow.
Precision matters.
There is something deeply philosophical about the Sagittarian mind. They are not satisfied with surface answers.
They want meaning.
They want truth that can withstand questioning. And if something collapses under scrutiny, they cannot respect it. That is why Sagittarius sometimes feels misunderstood. They are not attacking your belief.
They are testing its strength. In 2026, this quality becomes sharper but calmer, less reactive,
More strategic.
Sagittarius learned that expansion does not require constant opposition. Sometimes growth happens by building something better, not just challenging what exists. And this is where their true evolution begins,
They stop proving themselves.
and start positioning themselves. You may notice this shift in a Sagittarius this year.
Less arguing,
More action, less debating,
more directing their energy toward what aligns. Because challenging limits is powerful, but building beyond them is unstoppable.
life lessons.
Here is the deeper truth hidden in this secret.
Questioning is not disrespect. It is intelligence in motion.
Growth begins where comfort ends, but expansion without wisdom becomes destruction.
Sagittarius teaches us that limits are not always enemies, but they must always be examined.
You are allowed to question the ceiling placed above you. You are allowed to redefine expectations. You are allowed to outgrow environments that once fit you. But ask yourself,
Are you resisting because you feel controlled,
or are you resisting because you feel called to something greater?
In 2026, the Sagittarian lesson is clear.
Do not challenge for ego, challenge for evolution.
And when you do expand, do it with precision, not impulse.
Comment if this resonates with you, because the next secret will explain why Sagittarius often appears impatient when in reality they experience time and opportunity in a way that most people never understand.
And once you see that, you will understand their urgency. Let's continue. Secret number 4.
They seem impatient, but they are actually time aware. People say Sagittarius is impatient. They say they rush decisions. They say they get bored easily. They say they move on too fast. But that interpretation misses something deeper.
Sagittarius is not impatient. Sagittarius is aware.
There is a subtle but powerful difference. The archer does not waste arrows. They aim with intention, and when the moment feels right, they release. What others call impatience is often Sagittarian clarity about timing.
Sagittarius feels when energy has peaked. They feel when growth has plateaued. They feel when opportunity has passed its expiration date. And in 2026, this internal clock becomes more precise. Sagittarius begins to recognize faster when something has reached its limit, whether it is a job, a friendship, a partnership, or a belief system. While others are still negotiating comfort, Sagittarius is already sensing stagnation. It is not restlessness for chaos. It is restlessness for movement.
The fire within Sagittarius is not meant to sit in still air.
It needs oxygen. It needs direction. It needs momentum.
When momentum disappears, so does their patience. You may have witnessed this in your own life. A Sagittarius who commits fully to something passionately, enthusiastically, only to lose interest when growth stops. People interpret that as inconsistency, but what they fail to understand is this.
Sagittarius does not abandon things randomly. They abandon what no longer expands.
There is a philosophical urgency inside them, a quiet awareness that life is finite,
A subconscious understanding that time cannot be recycled. So when something feels like it is consuming time without producing meaning, Sagittarius grows uneasy. And in 2026, that unease turns into action.
This year pushes Sagittarius to make decisions faster, not recklessly, but decisively. They are less willing to wait for external validation, less willing to delay movement for others' comfort, less willing to postpone growth for the sake of politeness. But here is the shadow side. When Sagittarius moves too quickly, they can overlook nuance. They may exit situations that require deeper patience. They may pursue the next horizon before fully harvesting the present one. And sometimes growth requires endurance, not escape. This is the balancing lesson of 2026.
Sagittarius must learn to distinguish between boredom and misalignment,
between discomfort that signals growth and discomfort that signals stagnation. Because not all waiting is wasted time.
Some waiting builds strength. Some pauses sharpen aim.
Even the archer pulls back before releasing forward.
And that pause is not weakness. It is power gathering itself. In 2026, Sagittarius begins to understand that movement is strongest when guided by wisdom, not urgency alone.
You may notice a shift.
Instead of reacting impulsively, they begin to assess strategically. Instead of chasing every opportunity, they choose the ones aligned with long-term expansion. Instead of fearing stillness, they learn to use it.
Because true impatience is emotional reactivity.
Sagittarian time awareness is visionary precision, and that distinction changes everything.
Life lessons.
Here is the deeper truth hidden in this secret.
Your sense of urgency is not always a flaw.
Sometimes it is intuition. Sometimes it is awareness that you are meant for more. But urgency must be examined.
Are you moving because you are evolving? Or are you moving because you are uncomfortable? Sagittarius teaches us that time is sacred. Do not waste it on environments that shrink you. But also do not abandon something meaningful just because it feels challenging.
Growth requires momentum, but mastery requires patience.
In 2026, the Sagittarian lesson is this: move with purpose, pause with intention, and never confuse temporary discomfort with permanent misalignment. Comment if this resonates with you, because the next secret reveals something that surprises many people: why Sagittarius, despite their intensity and fire, rarely holds grudges. And once you understand that, you will understand their emotional strength. Let's continue. Secret number 5. They don't hold grudges because they refuse to carry emotional weight. Many people assume that someone as intense and truth-driven as Sagittarius would be explosive in conflict. But what surprises most is this:
Sagittarius rarely holds grudges.
They may feel anger, they may feel disappointment, they may feel betrayal, but they do not carry it.
And that distinction is powerful. The archer does not shoot backward.
They move forward.
Sagittarius understands something instinctively that many people struggle to learn. Resentment is heavy,
and heavy things slow you down.
In 2026, this quality becomes even more refined. Sagittarius begins to recognize faster when anger has served its purpose and when it has become unnecessary baggage.
They allow themselves to feel emotions fully, but they do not live inside them. There is a philosophical layer to this.
Sagittarius is ruled by expansion, by higher meaning, by the search for wisdom, and resentment blocks expansion.
Holding on to past wounds traps energy in yesterday.
Sagittarius wants tomorrow.
This does not mean they forget what happened.
It means they choose not to relive it.
You may have experienced this with a Sagittarius. An argument happened, voices were raised, truths were spoken bluntly, and then, the next day, they were normal.
Not pretending,
Not suppressing,
simply done.
because to Sagittarius, once something has been expressed honestly, it no longer needs to be stored. But here is the shadow side.
When Sagittarius forgives too quickly, they sometimes bypass deeper emotional processing.
They may convince themselves that something doesn't matter when it actually does. They may move on externally, while internally something remains unresolved.
And in 2026, this is where growth happens. Sagittarius begins to understand that release does not mean avoidance.
True forgiveness requires awareness. True strength requires integration. Because there is a difference between letting go and pushing aside. The archer must know when to drop the weight and when to examine the wound. You may notice that Sagittarius in 2026 becomes more reflective,
Less reactive, yes, but also more intentional about emotional closure.
They no longer pretend something did not affect them. They simply refuse to let it define them. And this is where their emotional resilience becomes clear. Sagittarius does not dwell in darkness. They extract the lesson. They convert pain into perspective. They transform disappointment into direction.
Because every experience, even betrayal, must serve growth. If it does not serve growth, it is released.
That is their internal philosophy. And it is why people often describe Sagittarius as light. But that light is not naive.
It is chosen.
Life lessons. Here is the deeper truth hidden in this secret. Forgiveness is not weakness.
It is energy management.
You cannot aim forward if your hands are full of old battles. But be careful.
Releasing resentment does not mean tolerating repeated harm.
You can forgive and still enforce boundaries. You can move forward and still remember the lesson.
Sagittarius teaches us that carrying anger into the future is optional.
Learning from it is mandatory.
In 2026, the Sagittarian lesson is this:
Feel deeply, speak honestly, release intentionally,
and never allow the past to become heavier than your purpose. Comment if this resonates with you.
because the next secret will reveal something many people fear: why Sagittarius fiercely protects their independence and what happens when someone tries to control them. And that is where the fire becomes unmistakable.
Let's continue. Secret number 6.
Their independence is not rebellion, it is identity.
If there is one word most associated with Sagittarius, it is freedom. But freedom is often misunderstood.
People think Sagittarius resists control because they dislike authority. They think Sagittarius values independence because they fear intimacy. They think Sagittarius pulls away because they are unstable. But none of that captures the truth.
Sagittarius does not defend independence as a preference.
They defend it as survival.
The archer must have space to aim. Without space, there is no direction.
Without direction, there is no purpose.
And without purpose, Sagittarius begins to feel suffocated. In 2026, this instinct intensifies. Sagittarius becomes more aware of where their autonomy has been subtly compromised in relationships and work environments, in social expectations.
They begin to sense where they have adjusted themselves to maintain peace.
And something inside them refuses to continue shrinking. This is not rebellion for ego.
This is alignment protection.
Sagittarius understands that once they begin living according to someone else's script, they slowly lose connection to their internal compass. And that internal compass is everything.
You may have witnessed this before, a Sagittarius who seemed deeply invested in a relationship until subtle control patterns emerged. Small restrictions, constant questioning, emotional monitoring.
At first, they may try to accommodate,
But eventually something shifts, because control does not just irritate Sagittarius.
It alarms them. It triggers an instinct that says, move. In 2026, that instinct becomes faster. Sagittarius will not wait for control to become suffocation.
They detect it early, and they create distance decisively. But here is the shadow side.
When independence becomes hyper-defensive, Sagittarius can mistake vulnerability for loss of autonomy.
They may withdraw from emotional depth because it feels like exposure. They may resist guidance because it feels like constraint. And this is where growth unfolds.
True independence is not isolation. True independence is the ability to connect without losing yourself. In 2026, Sagittarius begins to refine this balance.
They learn that partnership does not equal imprisonment. That shared direction does not erase individuality.
That asking for support does not weaken autonomy.
The fire of Sagittarius is not meant to burn alone.
It is meant to illuminate,
but it must remain self-directed. That is the key.
Sagittarius does not need constant supervision.
They need trust. They do not need instructions. They need space to execute. They do not need to be controlled. They need to be respected. And when they feel respected, their loyalty deepens, their warmth expands, their commitment strengthens. Because independence for Sagittarius is not distance from others.
It is closeness to self. And that closeness to self allows them to love without resentment. Life lessons. Here is the deeper truth hidden in this secret.
You cannot build a life worth living by abandoning your own direction. Freedom is not selfish.
It is responsibility for your own path.
But there is also a warning here.
If you defend independence so fiercely that you reject connection, you risk building walls instead of boundaries. Sagittarius teaches us that autonomy and intimacy are not opposites.
They are partners.
In 2026, the Sagittarian lesson is this.
Protect your direction. Choose environments that respect your space, but do not confuse control with commitment. The strongest freedom is not the freedom to leave.
It is the freedom to stay because you want to.
Comment if this resonates with you, because the next secret reveals something even more intriguing: why Sagittarius, despite being open and expressive, is surprisingly cautious when it comes to love.
And that hidden layer changes everything. Let's continue.
Secret number 7. They appear fearless in love, but they guard their heart carefully.
Sagittarius is often seen as open,
outgoing, expressive, spontaneous. They laugh easily, they speak freely, they move confidently.
And because of that, people assume they fall in love just as easily.
But that assumption is wrong.
Sagittarius does not give their heart quickly.
They give their energy quickly. There is a difference. The archer can be warm, attentive, exciting, without being emotionally surrendered. Because when it comes to love, Sagittarius is not reckless. They are observant.
In 2026, this becomes even more refined. Sagittarius becomes slower to attach, but deeper when they do.
They begin to recognize that attraction is not alignment. That chemistry is not compatibility. That excitement is not sustainability.
And so they watch, they listen, they evaluate how someone handles truth space, independence, growth.
Because for Sagittarius, love must feel expansive.
If love feels confining, they withdraw. If love feels manipulative, they detach. If love feels stagnant, they lose interest.
But if love feels like shared direction, shared exploration, shared growth, then Sagittarius commits with intensity. The reason they guard their heart is not fear of intimacy.
It is fear of misalignment. Sagittarius understands something many do not.
The wrong connection can derail purpose,
and purpose for them is sacred.
You may have seen this dynamic. A Sagittarius who seems deeply engaged, at first playful, attentive, expressive,
but if subtle signs of control appear,
if insecurity starts to dominate, if emotional pressure replaces inspiration, they pull back, not dramatically, but decisively, because once they sense that a relationship might limit their expansion, they instinctively protect their autonomy. This can confuse people. They say Sagittarius is inconsistent in love,
But what is really happening is this: Sagittarius is constantly measuring whether love supports growth. And in 2026, they become less tolerant of romantic illusions.
They no longer chase potential. They choose reality. They no longer romanticize red flags. They trust their intuition faster. But here is the shadow side. When Sagittarius guards their heart too tightly, they risk missing depth. They may keep one foot outside the door. They may protect themselves so thoroughly that vulnerability feels threatening.
And vulnerability is required for true connection.
This is the emotional evolution of 2026.
Sagittarius is learning that emotional depth does not equal emotional imprisonment.
That trust does not eliminate freedom. That surrender, when mutual, strengthens rather than restricts.
The archer must lower the bow to embrace. And that moment when Sagittarius truly lets someone in is rare.
But when it happens, it is powerful. Because they do not love halfway. They love forward. Life lessons.
Here is the deeper truth hidden in this secret.
Do not confuse openness with emotional availability.
Energy is easy to give. Vulnerability is not. Sagittarius teaches us that love should expand your life, not shrink it, but be careful.
Protecting your heart should not become permanent defense. Caution is wisdom.
Fear is limitation. In 2026, the Sagittarian lesson is this: choose relationships that amplify your direction.
Do not settle for chemistry without growth. And when you find alignment, allow yourself to step fully inside it. Because true love does not cage the archer.
It runs beside them.
Comment if this resonates with you.
Because the final secret reveals the most powerful core of Sagittarius, the hidden philosophy that drives everything they do. And once you understand it, you understand the fire itself.
Let's continue.
Secret number 8.
They are not just adventurous. They are truth-driven to the core. Most people describe Sagittarius as adventurous. They talk about travel, movement, new experiences, risk-taking.
But that is surface level.
Adventure is not the engine.
Truth is,
the archer does not shoot arrows randomly.
They aim at something. And what they are aiming at always is truth. In 2026, this becomes undeniable. Sagittarius becomes less interested in novelty for entertainment and more focused on experiences that expand understanding.
They are not moving just to move. They are searching.
Searching for wisdom, searching for perspective, searching for meaning that feels authentic.
That is why Sagittarius can seem restless, because surface reality is rarely enough for them. They question narratives, they test beliefs, they explore ideas others are afraid to touch.
And sometimes that makes people uncomfortable, because Sagittarius does not just accept what they are told. They examine it, and if it does not withstand examination, they discard it.
This applies to relationships, to careers, to personal identity, to cultural expectations.
In 2026, this instinct intensifies. Sagittarius becomes less tolerant of illusion, less patient with half-truths,
less willing to perform roles that feel inauthentic. They may change direction suddenly, not because they are confused, but because they discovered something truer.
You may have seen this transformation.
A Sagittarius who seemed certain about a path until new information shifted their perspective.
And then without hesitation, they pivoted to outsiders that looks unstable.
But to Sagittarius, staying in something false is worse than starting over. This is the philosophical fire within them. Truth over comfort, expansion over security, alignment over attachment. But here is the shadow side. When Sagittarius becomes obsessed with truth, they can become blunt to the point of insensitivity. They may prioritize honesty over emotional nuance. They may expose flaws without considering timing, and truth delivered without compassion can wound. This is the refinement of 2026.
Sagittarius is learning that truth is strongest when carried with wisdom.
That insight is powerful, but delivery matters.
The archer must not only aim accurately,
they must release intentionally, because truth is not meant to destroy.
It is meant to illuminate.
And when Sagittarius learns to balance honesty with empathy, their influence becomes transformative. You may notice this shift: less impulsive bluntness, more measured clarity, less argument for ego, more conversation for growth. Because at their highest expression, Sagittarius is not just a seeker, they are a teacher. Their presence challenges others to grow, to question, to expand beyond fear. And that is why some people feel inspired by them, while others feel threatened. Sagittarius does not shrink to make others comfortable. They expand and invite others to rise with them. And in 2026, that invitation becomes louder. Life lessons. Here is the deeper truth hidden in this final secret. Your desire for truth is not arrogance. It is alignment with your higher self. But truth without compassion becomes force, and compassion without truth becomes weakness. Sagittarius teaches us that growth requires both. Seek knowledge, challenge assumptions, redefine what no longer feels authentic. But remember, how you deliver truth shapes how it is received. In 2026, the Sagittarian lesson is this: live honestly, speak consciously, move fearlessly toward what feels real, and never trade authenticity for approval. Comment if this resonates with you. Now, let us step into the final reflection, because when you combine all 8 secrets, a larger pattern emerges, and that pattern defines Sagittarius in 2026 more clearly than ever. Let's close this journey. Final reflection. Sagittarius in 2026, becoming more themselves than ever. If you step back and look at all 8 secrets together, something becomes clear. Sagittarius is not changing in 2026. They are clarifying. Clarifying what they tolerate, clarifying what they believe, clarifying who deserves access to them, clarifying where their energy belongs. This is not a year of chaos for Sagittarius. It is a year of alignment. Their avoidance of drama is no longer about convenience. It is about protection of purpose. Their loyalty is no longer automatic. It is earned through shared growth. Their independence is no longer defensive. It is intentional. Their impatience becomes discernment. Their forgiveness becomes wisdom. Their caution in love becomes self-respect. Their truth-seeking becomes refined influence. And when all of that comes together, something powerful happens. Sagittarius becomes dangerous to underestimate. Not loud, not aggressive, not reactive, but internally anchored. There is something incredibly strong about a Sagittarius who knows exactly who they are. In 2026, you may notice that Sagittarians speak less but mean more. They argue less but act more decisively. They explain themselves less but set clearer boundaries, because clarity does not need constant justification. The archer does not ask for permission to aim. They simply choose their direction. And that is the core of Sagittarius this year. Self-trust. Not ego, not rebellion, self-trust. They are learning that not everyone is meant to understand them. Not every space is meant to contain them. Not every relationship is meant to last. And that is not loss. That is refinement. When Sagittarius releases what no longer aligns, they are not destroying their world. They are redesigning it. But there is one final layer here, one that matters deeply. Expansion without reflection becomes chaos. Freedom without responsibility becomes isolation. Truth without empathy becomes division. So the evolution of Sagittarius in 2026 is not just about growth, it is about integration. Balancing fire with awareness. Balancing movement with intention. Balancing independence with connection. Because the strongest archer is not the one who shoots the farthest. It is the one who knows exactly why they are aiming. If you are a Sagittarius watching this, you may feel this shift already. You may feel less tolerance for distraction, less patience for inauthenticity, more desire for purpose. That is not restlessness. That is awakening. And if you love a Sagittarius, understand this. They are not pulling away from you. They are pulling closer to themselves. And if you can grow beside them, you will witness something extraordinary. But if you try to confine them, you will watch them disappear, because Sagittarius in 2026 is not shrinking to fit smaller spaces.
They are expanding into larger ones, and that expansion is unstoppable.
Final life lesson. Here is what Sagittarius teaches all of us this year. Protect your energy. Choose alignment over attachment. Value growth over comfort. Speak truth but refine it with wisdom. And above all,
Never apologize for becoming more yourself. Comment below if you recognize yourself in this, and if you are ready to explore Sagittarius at a depth most never reach. Subscribe and walk this path with me. Because this year, the archer is not aiming randomly,
they are aiming consciously.
and that makes all the difference.